Good evening, Hopewell Friends Meetings. Pastor Mike coming to you with Bible study tonight. I hope you don't mind just seeing a picture of me up here tonight. I've had a bad day or two and I have been very uncomfortable. And so I don't look my best right now. Anyway, but I will do have the audio tonight for this, and so I want to share with you the Bible study. I have a question tonight from Harry Daniel, who wanted to know about the Israelites in the desert. First of all, he wanted to know when the Israelites started eating the manna in the desert. And then he wanted to know about Passover, if they observed it in Passover, and if they did, how did they do it? Well, the first part about the Israelites eating manna, the Israelites started being fed by God shortly after leaving Egypt. They had come to a place where they were thirsty and dehydrated, and they tried to drink the water, but it was brackish. And so God had told them to take the wood from a tree and place it there in the water, and it sweetened it, made it taste better. And shortly after that, when they reached the desert of Zin, God told them that they would be fed daily bread from heaven, or food from heaven, and that they should only take a portion for the day, no more than that. Then on Fridays, they would take 2 days' portions, since they were not supposed to do anything on the Sabbath. So the Israelites began eating manna. Well, ate it all 40 years, so they were there in the desert. And so that's the answer to that first question. The second part of the question is about Passover. The Israelites, who were in Egypt, they were slaves in Egypt, but that wasn't always the case, as you know. At one point, Joseph had been the second in command in Egypt to help take care of the sharing of the grain with people. His family came and lived there during that famine when Joseph, he'd been sold into captivity. He won over the heart of Pharaoh finally after several incidences, and Pharaoh made him second in command and over all the food stores. So Joseph's family came to live with him. That's how the Israelites got there in Egypt. So after Joseph had ruled for 25, 30 years in this capacity, he died. And once he died, the Egyptians began to feel like they were worried that the Israelites might take over their land. A new Pharaoh was intact, and he got worried about this. So they enslaved the Israelites, made them work for them. And so after 250 years of living in slavery, Moses came to them because God had told him to go back to Egypt, since he had been there before, go back to Egypt and to set his nation Israel free from Pharaoh. So as Moses came in, he and Aaron, and of course the plagues that the plagues and the events that Moses shared with Pharaoh to convince him that God was in control didn't seem to really faze Pharaoh that much. Things like they turned the water to blood red, the locusts and the frogs, and all these plagues and things that Moses was trying to get Pharaoh to see that he needed to let the Israelites go, because God was more powerful than him and the gods that they worship. Remember, a Pharaoh was considered a god in Egypt. He was not considered a mere human. So after all these plagues and events and things that Moses put before Pharaoh, the Lord told Moses to tell the people to prepare a lamb, a paschal lamb, a sacrificial lamb, to keep it at home for 4 days to inspect it. And then on the given day, they were to slaughter the lamb and put the blood on the doorstep or the outside of the door, so that the angel of death would pass over them and not kill the firstborn. Of course, this affected not just the Israelites, but the Egyptians too. And this seemed to be the last straw for Pharaoh. He let the Israelites go, but no sooner had he let them go that he changed his mind and started after them. Anyway, after the Israelites escaped them, after the first year, God commanded them to celebrate Passover with the Paschal lamb, the sacrificial lamb. You know, the interesting thing about the lamb is this. The Egyptians worshipped lambs. It was a part of their god structure. And so for the Israelites to take a lamb and keep it captive in their house for 4 days certainly drew the ire of the Egyptians. So the Israelites were basically defying the Egyptians by taking one of their gods, the sheep and the lamb, and using it for a sacrifice. So after that first year, the sacrifice of the Passover, it looks like they probably had Passover the rest of the time. We do know on the 39th year, they observed Passover again with the Paschal lamb, the sacrificial lamb. For whatever reason, during that time, from the first celebration of Passover, a year after they were on their journey, until the 39th year, the end of the next 39 years, that God doesn't command them to use the Paschal lamb. Don't know why. Maybe it was, God saying, well, unless everybody can have a lamb, then we won't, tell everybody you have to have one. Maybe he was trying to be easy on them, or maybe he was just trying to see a young nation make a decision to do what they needed to do to celebrate the Passover, which would be to use the Paschal lamb. Maybe he was wanting to see if they honored him enough that they would do this on their own. We don't know. So here you have it. After the first year, the Passover, and then the last year, just before they went into the Promised Land, they had the Passover again. Definitely those 2 times. More than likely celebrated along the way, but they didn't have the Paschal lamb, but they just celebrated Passover. They celebrated in their homes like they'd done before on the very first Passover. They celebrated in their homes with a meal. So that's the answer to your question, Harry. Hopefully that gives you some closure on that question. We encourage you to send me some other biblical questions that we can talk about and mull over in the near future. God bless you. Have a wonderful night tonight.